In today's video, we're going to talk about 5 different types of tape that I use in all of my custom lighting creations and how you can do the same thing. I'm going to talk about how I use each type of tape, and then I'm even going to do a demo at the end showing how I use the last type, which might not even be something you know exists. Now this everybody should have just because it's so versatile. You can use double-sided foam tape on all kinds of stuff. I'll tell you the kind of things that I use it on right now. Now some but not all types of demon eyes have little mounts that you can just basically screw into place on something so that it's never going to come loose. But in a lot of cases, I'll actually use some of the double-sided foam tape, put that on the bottom side of a demon eye, and even with other types of demon eyes, a lot of times it doesn't make sense for me to use the mount. So what I'll actually do is I'll remove the bracket, and what I typically do is I will wrap this in like black electric tape, and then I'll put a piece of foam tape right on top of that so that I can stick it into place on my GTR projectors where it's just aiming down straight into the projector, and it's got something that's holding it down right here by just using that foam tape. So super useful for me. I use it all the time, and I actually use another piece of tape when I do this exact setup, but we'll get to that in a bit. Next, we have our masking tapes. Now, we have different styles, different strengths of masking tapes, and this is the one that I like to use, especially if I don't want to get like paint in the area where there's rubber butyl on the inside of a little housing, like when I do side markers. So I'll just tape everything off with this because it's super flexible. But if I don't want it to pull up the chrome like you might have seen in my last video, I use something like this. It just doesn't really hold on much at all. It's barely there enough that it will kind of like hug onto the piece a little bit. It's certainly not gonna just hang on by itself. So I'll put a layer of this sometimes on anything that I think is a little bit fragile, like chrome, and then I'll tape over it with this. And masking tape overall doesn't need too much explanation. You just know when you got things that you don't want to get taped, you don't want to get covered up. I used this white tape on these Lamborghini taillights all right here, and then I used the yellow tape on top of that, and where I got some of this on the chrome originally, it actually lifted it up, and we had to use that special paint just to even get that kind of a mirror finish that it still has on there now. So masking tape, use it wisely. Don't just tape everything assuming that nothing's gonna get pulled up with it. All right, we got our fine line tape now. This kind of goes hand in hand with the masking tape, but a lot of times this is the stuff that will make your painter hate you or make you hate yourself if you're doing a bunch of custom projects. This stuff comes in really handy if you're gonna do something super detailed. You want everything to have a perfect edge to it. You're gonna have to use a lot of fine line and take a ton of time to do this. A good example of using fine line is I used to do these GTR projector shrouds, and I would tape off just the inside little section and then paint all the rest, which would leave a two-tone, painted and that original chrome in just those little sections right there. The problem with taping those GTR shrouds is that it pulls up the chrome just like happened on the Lamborghini taillights and the masking tape drama, and it is just not a fun thing. So again, make sure that you know exactly what you're taping off, why you're doing it, and some of the pitfalls that might happen if you screw around and try to get fancy. You can get fancy all day long, but if you pull up your masking tape and it pulls the chrome with it, it really doesn't matter how dope your paint looks, because you're gonna have all this ugly plastic showing underneath the chrome, and nah. Before we move on to tape number 4, give me a like and definitely subscribe to the channel if you're getting value out of this stuff. Hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss those uploads. This stuff, I swear, this is my favorite tape that I have, and this I think was like a $20 or $30 roll. This is the widest that I could find at a local store. This is 3-inch wide aluminum tape, perfect for things that you just want to have a lot of structure to it. So I mentioned on my demon eyes that I used a second type of tape, and that is because I've got no bracket installed anymore. I've got this little dude with electric tape around it, or heat shrink. That's actually how I've been doing it more lately. Heat shrink around it, and then double-sided tape, and then it's pushing down and gripping onto something like, this is actually the lid to the projector on the GTR. So if I take this guy, imagine that I've got a little piece of foam tape on this, and then it's pushed down into place on top of that, we're just hoping that that foam tape never lets go, right? Well, that's probably not a good idea. So what I'll do is I'll cut little strips of this, and I'll take 3 strips of aluminum tape and I'll layer it over in a way so that not only the wire, but the actual demon eye itself is completely pinched down with the double-sided foam tape on the bottom. Nothing that would make any sort of an issue on the bottom side coming through this, because that might affect the low beam output, all for the sake of a cool glowing demon eye. Definitely not worth it. So getting creative and knowing that the reason that you're putting things in place is because things don't always go the way that you want. You don't know if you're gonna finish a project, put it all together, seal it up, turn it on, and you're gonna have a dead demon eye. If you do that and you've screwed little things into place and everything's like permanent, then you're kind of screwed. I've had a really good run of using the double-sided foam tape as well as the aluminum tape when I do my demon eyes, and I'm really not gonna change it because I have no reason to. This is our thermal tape. I'm about to use this right now, and I'll explain more about it as I go. So I recently got an order for my switchback GTR lightning bolts. And when I assemble them to ship off to somebody, I want them to be as ready to install as possible so that they've got their switchback function. They're all good to go, right? But one thing that I didn't do when I put this set together was I didn't put any thermal tape on there. And even just right now, me having the metal that could have potentially touched one of these resistors on the bottom, super sketch. I'm lucky that I didn't just screw up and cost myself a lot of time that I've already put into these things. Something really important when I do all my GTR jobs is I cover up all of these onboard resistors, not because they're gonna get messed up and fall off or something like that, but because it adds cooling to them. And why would we not wanna have something that's just in there cooking all the time on without having something to keep it as safe as possible? I've got to do 4 of these things. So I'm going to cut out the little shapes that I need, drop them into place, and get these bolts shipped off to Canada. I'm on my last little tiny couple inches of the thinner roll I have of this to do these top parts. So I'm gonna use the thicker one, and I'm just gonna kind of cut it at a slight diagonal angle. Each one will kind of need to be the opposite of the other. So yeah, that's why I'm gonna cut this. There it is. They are all taped up and ready to ship off. That's just one of the things that I do when I prep those parts, but it's because I have access to that tape that it makes it super simple for me to do it. It's even easier when I have the second type of thermal tape that's just way thinner. I cut a little piece, zip it on there. No need to trim or cut, but I mean, you saw, that wasn't very difficult. It was fast. I got my things that are good to go and to ship off now, and I made a video about tape. I will see you guys tomorrow on another episode of Vlogmas.